This is the original iPhone SE. Retailing for £400 in 2016, the iPhone SE received 6 years of software support and is still receiving security updates to this day. The iPhone SE was essentially the guts of an iPhone 6S in the body of an iPhone 5S, and you can pick up an original SE for between 40 and 50 quid in 2023. But should you? And for some people, you know what, this might not actually be that bad value. The original SE is surprisingly still usable today, although it is tiny. I think it makes a good backup phone or a good first phone for a kid or something along those lines. In this video, I'll give you a full overview of how the original SE holds up in 2023, so you can decide whether or not you want to go ahead and buy one. So starting off with design, the first thing you're going to notice here is how absolutely tiny this phone is, especially by today's standards. It's got a tiny 4-inch LCD display, which took me some getting used to again. Although I must say this LCD display is pretty good and does hold up reasonably well. I'll be honest, I use an iPhone 12 mini as my daily driver, and I would love Apple to introduce a full screen display iPhone that was in the form factor of the SE. I'm just not into massive phones, which is the norm nowadays. One thing that's really interesting is how small phones really aren't demanded by consumers anymore. So Apple did not update the mini lineup, and look at this chart of the average screen sizes on phones and how it's just increased. And even at the time, the SE did have a small display. However, there are a small group of people like myself who are very vocal and really like small phones. Rather weirdly, the design of this phone hasn't actually aged that badly because Apple ended up bringing back the squared off side, so my iPhone 12 and this SE actually look pretty similar, and the quality of the SE is just fantastic. They could absolutely withstand a beating, so as you can see here, this phone is well used and was never kept in a case but still works great. And I'm just a big fan of how this phone looks and feels. It really is top notch. Touch ID on this phone works really well and is reliable. So moving on to performance. Performance is surprisingly good for what it is, but obviously you have got to manage your expectations when talking about a phone from 2016. So this phone hasn't got the latest version of iOS. Apple left this phone on iOS 15, and there aren't going to be any more iterations of iOS for the SE, although it is still receiving security updates, which is good news. Opening up the basic iOS apps like iMessage, phone, and stuff like that all works really well, but obviously it's slower than a newer phone, but it doesn't feel painfully slow and it's still usable. When it comes to apps that you've downloaded from the App Store, it is a bit slow. For a phone that came out in 2016, it's surprisingly good. YouTube can take a little while to load, but once the app has loaded, it works fine and you can play videos and skip about the video really easily and you won't encounter any issues. However, I do notice that the phone is getting quite warm even when using it for basic tasks. So I've literally been using this phone for like 15 minutes and it has started to heat up in my hand. You can run some more demanding apps on this phone. So you can play Call of Duty Mobile on the lowest graphics settings, but it's not that good of an experience. One reason just being because the screen is so small, and another being it takes so long to load and it does drop a few frames whilst playing. But realistically, the type of person buying an original SE isn't going to be the type of person looking for a gaming phone. If you are, this isn't the phone for you. Ultimately, the SE can do all the basics, such as taking photos, calling and texting really well, and it can do some slightly more demanding stuff reasonably well, such as going online, social media and some fast food apps. All work pretty well, although sometimes they do start to slow down and cause the phone to heat up pretty fast. When it comes to the more demanding stuff like big games or big applications, it can be really slow to load them and it will definitely cause this phone to overheat. Although credit where it's due, pretty much every app on the App Store will still work on this SE, although it just might not perform as good as you're expecting. If you're after a small phone for just doing the basics, texting, photos, and calling people, then the SE is surprisingly capable of doing that. One thing I would mention is that this SE is the 16GB variant, and that is not enough storage today. So a few photos, a few videos, and even the software updates, you're going to be out of space really fast. If you are thinking about picking up a used SE, definitely go for a 32 or 64GB option as the minimum. The 16GB just won't suffice. So let's move on to the camera. The camera holds up surprisingly well. The main camera can take 12 megapixel photos or 4K video, and for what it is, it holds up pretty decently in good light. The photos look alright, although it can struggle with exposure under difficult lighting situations, but for capturing your memories, the iPhone SE is going to do the job reasonably well. Here's a few sample photos that I've taken on this phone, and I don't think they look too bad. In my opinion, video is where this phone holds up well. Battery life is one area where this particular SE is absolutely dreadful. It drains at about 1% a minute whilst just doing really light applications, and even on standby it doesn't last long at all. I can only get it to last maybe half a day on standby. So if you are going to buy a used original SE, just bear in mind that you're going to have to get the battery replaced, which will add additional costs. Apple will charge you 50 quid if you want them to replace the battery. However, you can buy a battery online for about 20 quid and it shouldn't be the most difficult of repairs if you're confident in this kind of thing. Once you've changed the battery still isn't going to be amazing, but it will last you a full day of reasonable use and you shouldn't have to worry about it dying on you within a day. So to conclude, I think this is surprisingly good for the money. I don't think you're going to get a phone for 40 or 50 pounds that is this capable, and especially if you're like me and you want a small phone, you're definitely not going to find a phone that's this size and this capable. I think the original SE makes a really good backup phone. That's why I've got it. I just keep it in the bottom of a drawer, and if my main phone does fail, I know that I've got a reliable phone that I can fall back on. However, if you want it as your main phone and you only want to do the basics and you want something small and unintrusive, the SE is probably a not bad of a buy. And for me, where I think that this phone really shines is being the first phone for a kid. I see kids out there with just these humongous iPhones that barely fit in their hands, and they're essentially just carrying around with them these £1,000 glass bricks that if they drop, it is going to smash into a million pieces. And I don't think it's necessary for a kid, if I'm being honest. I think that the SE will do all the basics perfectly well enough for a kid's first phone. It's really durable, it's the right size, and it's a good entry point into mobile phones, I suppose. I hope you enjoyed this video and found it useful. If you did, please do subscribe. My next video should be a 2020 iPhone SE review. I've also moved house. This is sort of the new filming set, I think. I'm just trying to sort out where I want to film. Maybe I'll do a house tour video and make it unlisted or something at some point. But yeah, I've moved house. I've got a designated place to film now. So hopefully more videos coming out a little bit more frequently. Thanks for watching. Cheers.